So one, it's time to start Pledge of Allegiance, and then we'll have a moment of silence, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, first up, I need a motion to approve the agenda. All in favor? Aye. Okay, correspondence to the board. Dear Mount Noster Board of Education, admin, and staff, thank you so much for the beautiful flowers you sent to my family. We were all touched by your thoughtfulness. I am beyond grateful to the wonderful people at ANSD. You all hold a special place in my heart. Miss you. Love, Shelby. Thank you so much for the beautiful arrangement for my mom's celebration of life. I know it may not have been planned, but they had one of her favorite flowers, yellow roses, and one of my dad's favorites, purple iris. It was perfect and a wonderful addition to the celebration of my mom. Your kindness is greatly appreciated. A.G. Sowers and family. Recognitions.
So we actually have a great group to recognize this evening, and our Phenomenal Panthers here in October is actually our KNHS choir. So let's give them a big round of applause. So just a few things about our choir. Recently, they were selected to perform in the West Central All District Choir. 3 students in this group also auditioned in September, and with nearly 400 other students at Pleasant Hill. Our students performed a 2-minute contest style solo piece and a blind audition, and completed a key signature identification in melody and part specific sightseeing. 3 students who were selected through this process are Abigail Johns, who's with us tonight, Matthew Nash, and Peter Stevens. This is Abigail. Actually, it's her 2nd year to be selected, and 8 additional choir students were chosen by our director of vocal music, Mr. John Logan, to perform at that West Central All District Choir, and they were Kira Andrade, Brett Barker, Kyla Boone, Ethan Corder, John Lindback, Jenna Moreland, Dakota Robinson, and Fallon Turner. All these singers rehearsed and performed on Saturday, October 13th at the Oak Grove High School. There in Oak Grove. And we just want to say congratulations, bring all of these individuals forward, tell them how much we appreciate them and all that they do for us. They truly are Phenomenal Panthers, and let's bring them forward, these district winners. Thank you guys. Come on forward.
All right, I'll take a couple pictures on 3. 1, 2, 3. All right. Got it. Thank you.
One more big round of applause, please.
So Mr. Cunningham, he proposes a little sightseeing and just a acapella time for you guys. Any of that before we leave? No, Johnny said no. Congratulations, guys. Great job. We also have our Partners in Education tonight, our award, and tonight is a very important group. They do so much for us, and we are truly honored to have them as part of our team. And they truly are Partners in Education, not only for administrative staff, for teachers, but also for students. And the work that they do a lot of times is behind the scenes. But tonight we'd like to celebrate our school counselors and our military and family life counselors. So let's give them a huge round of applause. So the counseling team obviously has a tremendous impact with not only scheduling our students, getting them in, enrolling them, but the day-to-day activities that they do within their classroom as well, through the lessons that they have with the students, within the small groups that they pull students out, and the impact that they have for those students and the support that they give them. We truly are appreciative of everything that they do, and we would love for our counselor team to be able to come forward and get a picture of us as well. I think there are a few that cannot have a picture, but I would like to recognize each of them by name. Our Navin Public School counseling team is at Whiteman, Andrew Leonard. At K&E, Amy Wheeler. At our middle school, we have Heather Wallace and Taylor Morrison. At our high school, but unable to be with us tonight, is Kimberly Mastery and Katrina Grunsinger. And our MFLAX, who will remain back there, will be Barbara, I'm going to butcher your last name. Boucher, and Barbara Boucher, and then Yvonne Bird. So let's give them a big round of applause. I cannot be in the picture, but I wish you could appreciate the things that they do. Tina, what about this? How about we come on? We'll come.
All right, I have everybody in it. Thank you.
All right. And board members, if we go around and take your hand and let us know as well.
Okay, principal and directors reports are on there. MSBA report.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Missouri School Boards Association Board Report for the month of October. We thank you for the opportunity to share some news and information during a few minutes of your board meeting. We begin with a look at the recent 2018 MSBA Annual Conference, where nearly 1,300 school board members and administrators gathered to improve their leadership skills. Board members and administrators had the opportunity to attend more than 130 breakout sessions and workshops presented mostly by leaders from school districts throughout the state. One of the keynote speakers at the conference this year was former U.S. Senator and professional basketball star Bill Bradley, a graduate of Crystal City High School near St. Louis. Senator Bradley said he believes our public schools need to place an even stronger emphasis on teaching the history and practice of our democracy. He said it will be up to our young people to shape the future of our democracy if they choose to do so.
And that's where I think our education system is so important. Be able to talk about, well, what is our government? How does it work? What has it done over years? What has it done? What has our democracy done to try to create and successfully create these high living standards of life expectancy or literacy rates? What was it in our history that led us to where we are now? And if you want to shape your future, then you need to get busy doing the necessary work of a citizen. Not simply the rights of citizenship, but the responsibilities of citizenship, which I think fundamentally is voting in this country.
MSBA presented Senator Bradley with the 2018 Outstanding Graduate of Missouri's Public Schools Award following his remarks. Those attending the annual conference also had a chance to hear from members of the State Board of Education during a panel discussion. State Board Vice President Dick Lenz told the audience he believes the pieces are in place to make progress on providing more Missouri children with quality early childhood education programs.
We're probably in a better position than I've ever seen us be in, because I know MSBA has pushed for early childhood forever, and we have been working on it, and now the governor has expressed that this is an important key to him. So all the pieces should be in place. Now all we have to do is convince the legislature to do something.
Lenz and other members of the state board also discussed the process now underway for selecting a permanent commissioner of education. He said the state board will be conducting interviews at the end of this month and hopes to have a permanent commissioner named sometime in November. MSBA Executive Director Melissa Randall, who moderated the state board panel discussion, said the board is now in a solid position to move forward with the selection process after months of turmoil earlier this year.
The reason the state board could not function for several months this last year is because we have a state law that requires a minimum of 5 of the 8 state board members to be in place and to take action in order to function. And so we now have, and we also felt like it was important, even though the governor could appoint the state board members, and he could have filled out all 8 positions, Governor Parson, this summer and fall, we felt like it was really important before the decision was made to hire the commissioner that a minimum of 5 of those board members were confirmed. And now we have 6 confirmed positions.
The MSBA Delegate Assembly met during the annual conference to vote on the association's position statements that form the basis of MSBA's advocacy efforts. Position statements approved by the Delegate Assembly include support of increased state funding for early childhood education programs, support of increasing the motor fuel tax to improve roads and bridges on which our students are transported to and from school every day, and opposition to moving school board elections away from the April election day. One of the highlights of this year's annual conference was a student showcase where students from school districts throughout the state were on hand to share information about innovative programs in their districts, such as this roller coaster project constructed by students from McDonald County and a food truck operated by students from the Blue Springs School District. The annual MSBA School Personnel Information Survey is now open. This survey collects information on the wages, salaries, and benefits of teachers and other school employees to help boards and administrators make fully informed personnel decisions. Member districts that complete the survey and submit their salary schedules and collective bargaining agreements by November 12th receive free access to the data collected. Make sure your district's information is included in this year's database. That's it for this month's edition of the MSBA Board Report. Thanks for allowing us to have some time at your board meeting, and so long from Columbia.
Okay, next up is superintendent report.
All right, well, good evening, everyone, and welcome, guests. Glad you're here with us. Just a couple of things before I get into my report. It does look like there's an indication that maybe Eric Knost, who is superintendent out of Rockland School District, may be the front runner for the commissioner position. He has officially resigned or retired from the Rockland School District, which would make him eligible for that position. So that has not happened yet, but it does appear that may be happening, and I think that would probably be a very good thing for our state. So we will closely watch that, and hopefully we'll have an update on that by next month. I don't think there's anything else from the MSBA report that I want to follow up on. So jumping right into my report, first quarter is in the books, and we are holding parent-teacher conferences this week. High school administration and counselors are there tonight with their staff doing our fall parent-teacher conferences. So things went well. Looks like we had a good turnout in our other buildings so far this week, and glad to see that, and thank you teachers for that hard work. As of this meeting, we have about 7 weeks of school left until Christmas break. We're hoping that the weather will hold and that we will get in a good first semester without any interruptions, and then hold on to our hats to see what happens in January, February, and March. On October 8th, district teachers participated in their second in-service day of the year, and again focused on the Leader in Me program implementation. We're pleased with the progress being made and expect this program will continue to have positive impacts on our climate and culture in our buildings. Last month, our fall NAPIS meeting was again successful. Reports back from NAPIS is that we have received $31 million in increased impact aid, $31 million in basic support, and $1 million in increased federal lands. So we're happy with that. The other part that is quite interesting is NAPIS is endorsing a bill from a representative out of Arizona asking for a one-time $1 billion with a B dollar outlay for school infrastructure. So when we carried that to the Hill to speak with our congressional delegation, we definitely kind of held our tongues a little bit when we shared that, but also did stress that we definitely are in need of infrastructure funds, and frankly, the timing is right to at least get that ask out there. If you recall from prior conversations, NAPIS did conduct a full survey of member districts and identified about $4.2 billion in infrastructure needs across all of our military connected and federal land schools. So we'll see what happens out of that. In parallel with that, we know that the NDAA 19 was approved and is in the bill. However, the funding was cut. An update on that, or it was not funded, so it's included in the bill, but there was no funding. As of yesterday, the Association of Defense Communities has reached out to their membership across the nation, asking for what the community infrastructure needs are. So we will be responding to that, and frankly, it would probably be better placement to see that money go into, through that route other than NAPUS, which would be spread out over all of our federal land. So we'll see if we get any funding. We're asking on both sides and hope to see some funding at some point. Meetings on Capitol Hill went well. We did actually see Senator Blunt and Senator McCaskill this time, as well as Representatives Hartzler, Lutmeyer, and Graves. All have pledged ongoing support for federal impact aid. On October 2nd, Valdosta Public Schools was pleased to host the quarterly Make Free meeting in our district. We had attendance from about a dozen leaders across our state, including our interim Commissioner of Education, Roger Lorson, and our Executive Director for Make Free. So we were pleased to host that. The meeting went well, and thank you to Ms. Huntsman for helping host that. On October 5th, Valdosta Public Schools career and technical education students participated in visits to local companies, Intersys, Stalls, Dollar Tree, and a couple of others to see what local jobs are available within these business sectors. Again, this year was very successful, and Mr. Corin and I had an enjoyable time walking through Intersys and seeing the work that they do there. There's definitely plenty of very good jobs there for our local graduates. So we'll continue to look for ways to align those interests in our students with the manufacturing jobs in the region. On Monday, we will be hosting General and Mrs. Dawkins, who will be coming in to visit Whiteman Air Force Base again. They are making a stop by Whiteman Elementary to visit with our students and staff, so we look forward to hosting them. Also this week, hot smoke is in full effect. Mr. Nugent and I were talking before the meeting that the runway is as filled as you have seen it. So I imagine the sky will be as well in the days ahead, so we look forward to that. And I think that's it for my report. In terms of enrollment and attendance, Valdosta Elementary, 355 with 97% attendance. Valdosta Middle, 459, 97.69. Valdosta High School, 377 with 96.75. Whiteman Elementary, 366 with 97.24, for a district total of 1557 and a 97.17% attendance. A couple of notable things: enrollment is up in all buildings slightly, and also that is a stellar attendance rate for the month. And I want to say thank you to the principals for their job in that. And it looks like Valdosta Middle School, our building with the highest population, came in with the highest attendance rate. So nicely done, and keep up the good work. Fund balances for month ending, 13,740,689. Revenues to date, 5,349,788, which is 29.7% of anticipated, and expenditures to date, 2,946,863, which is 16.3% of budgeted. And then again, with my report, I did include the month in review of activities outside of the office, as well as a preview of the upcoming activities that we know of on the calendar. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Dr. Wheeler. I need a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
All in favor? Aye. Approval of bills for award. I need a motion. All in favor? Aye. MSBA 2018C policy update. This is first reading.
So as we head into the agenda items, I just want to let the board know it was a relatively heavy agenda tonight. A lot of information, not too many action items, but I'm going to kind of move through these and try to keep my foot on the pedal that's on the right. So at any time, if you need to slow down or talk a little bit more, let me know. But again, most of this was information, and in the as we get down into transportation, food service, and some of the reports, a almost all of that information has been seen before by the board, so I'll just highlight the updated need to know pieces. Item B in new business is 2018 city policy update, which is been for first read for the board. And no action.
Annual performance report.
This one is again for information only. It's a little sticky, but I just want to, for full transparency, let the board know what's going on in the annual performance report. As the board knows, Navasur Public Schools has led the entire Whiteman Air Force Base region on the annual performance report for the last 2 years. That entails about 40 schools surrounding the base, and we've been on top, and we've enjoyed that position. That being said, the process at DESE continues to be a little bit frustrating and offers, frankly, a little bit of questionable value to the district in terms of informing our decisions. This year, we still do not have our MAP scores from last year. Those have not been released along with the rest of the data that goes into the annual performance report, and we're here at the end of Q1. If that's not enough, that data will still not be available and reportable by the end of Q2. We're looking at sometime at the end of January, but that's not guaranteed to get that information back. One of the big sticking points right now is a big debate over cut scores. In other words, of all the students that tested, that took the test, they have not determined the cut scores that would determine if a student is basic, below basic, proficient, or advanced. So essentially, they're taking a criterion reference test and turning it into a norm referenced measure. I know in the morning, Mr. Coron will be going over to a meeting with DESE and with the Kansas City Massa group, and hopefully listening mainly, but there is definitely going to be some fireworks there in terms of what's going on. So that being said, we don't have anything to share on our APR other than we've led the way, we've enjoyed that position. We will be, again, in that leadership position or close to it, but I want to tell the board, there's questionable value in this process as it stands right now. For those that have been in this discussion before, this looks a whole lot like No Child Left Behind, where we had the AYP progress, where 100% of all students were going to hit these measures by a certain date. That process fell off the wagon as well along the way. So you may not hear as much about APR. If we're at the top again, we'll use that as one measuring point. In fact, we use that no matter where we are, but we are looking at other ways, and one of those is in our balanced scorecard that we're going to be rolling out with our new comprehensive school improvement plan. So just wanted to mention that to you, and we'll get you that data as soon as it's available.
And from an educator standpoint, really, why January? What's the point? I mean, we can't adjust your teaching or anything off those scores. It's January. Yeah.
Well, it gives us about 6 weeks before we take on that test.
Sure, absolutely.
Use that. So hopefully that will get better.
It's kind of pointless. I don't know what. Hey, women's wrestling. Sorry.
Next up is women's wrestling. This is something that's been kind of discussed with Mr. Easterwood and head coach Aaron Avery really since it was introduced back in the summer. Misha is splitting. Historically, women have wrestled alongside their male counterparts. They've decided that they're going to split those sports and allow females to have their own division, which frankly makes, in my opinion, makes sense. Obviously, wrestling is a huge sport, and I think they also see the opportunity to turn women's wrestling into a separate but also significant sport. The process is still a little, it still overlaps extensively with how the matches will look in the practices. So we won't see a lot of change with the addition of this sport, but we would see a small increase in cost in terms of bringing on a assistant coach that would handle the women's sports. One of the main reasons that we're bringing this forward is Coach Avery has indicated there's significant interest in participating in this sport from our female athletes. We'd love to see an inaugural state championship, or at least a good run towards that. So, in my opinion, it's something we ought to do as a board and give these students the opportunity to compete in their own division.
I need a motion to approve the Board of Women's Wrestling to begin 2018-19 season.
I got a quick question.
Yes.
It coincides with men's wrestling or boys wrestling at the same time. It's not a separate part of the season.
Yes, sir. So they'll continue to practice together like we do now with the co-ed. We've turned the restrooms into single-use restrooms in the weight wrestling rooms. So there's one student in at a time. So if you kind of like that, any crossover there, locker rooms would stay the same. And then one of the other things that we consider is we have a very high quality candidate that we have the opportunity to hire in, and we're pretty good about that as well.
Do you have any idea what kind of overall cost projection is going to be to the district for first year?
I would say first year will be probably 5,000 or less, including the stipend. As we go forward, depending on what the interest is, we could go up from there, but I do feel like it's going to be reasonably minimal.
I make a motion we adopt the women's wrestling. Is it going to be just ice or in the house?
Both.
Okay.
I second it. All in favor? Aye. Aye. This is the first reading on the fiscal year 19 budget amendment.
Again, presented for first read. I've kind of listed out the major points on this, and you won't typically see a budget amendment like this, but the board should be aware of everything that's listed here. We did discuss a couple of months back the addition of $1 million capital outlay to support the purchase of 10 new buses. We also are looking at a tractor and mower and some additional equipment. We had the uniforms. We've done some weight equipment. So we're looking at a $1 million increase in capital outlay. We also have the additional $250,000 in revenues and expenditures. Later in the agenda, actually next item is our Military Child Academic Support Program grant through the VIA. We have been formally awarded $1 million for that. So we included that $250,000 outlay in revenues and expenditures in this budget. Also in the initial budget, which was submitted and approved by the board, I had budgeted based on the anticipated revenues, but as the board knows, we received that late impact date payment for about $1.9 million of revenues. So that has been included in the budget, the recommended budget amendment. Also, we have other coding adjustments. Remember that we have all the source codes that have come into effect this year, as well as a lot of changes in what the state is requiring for coding. So we're going to continue to see revisions there as we get things lined out. So I did want to recommend this as first read, and between now and next meeting, any members of the board would like to come in and kind of go through this in detail. We're happy to do that with myself and Mrs. Huntsman and our grant coordinator over here for our MCAS grant. Project director, I believe, is the appropriate term.
Okay, next up is DODEA MCAS Grant 2018 for information only.
Again, as mentioned, we're pleased for the second year in a row to be the recipient of a DODEA MCAS grant. Last year, we received our maximum allocation of $1.25 million. This year, we were going for 1.25 again. Unfortunately, funding was a little tighter, so we are only bringing in $1 million, and we revised our budget to reflect that. We did on Monday confirm that our grant announcement on Whiteman Air Force Base, like the one we did in 2016, will be held on December 10th. The governor has confirmed his attendance, and General Nichols has confirmed his attendance. So with those two pieces in place, we'll be doing our outreach and other supporters and stakeholders of our school district. So if you can mark your calendar and you're able to attend, that would be another fantastic event. We will take all of our high school faculty and students out, and this year we're also asking to have Whiteman Elementary students come over and attend as well. So we will keep you updated, but we're very excited about that event and our ability to showcase our school district.
Next up is Summer School Historical Overview and Annual Report. I will need a motion to approve the annual Summer School Report.
And the 4 points that I would mention, I'm really not going to go through this in detail unless anyone would like to. Summer school was another big success this year. We did, actually, I will open it up. There we go. We ran the same program design as we have in the past, and ran that 19 days. We do run a slightly longer day in doing so, but that allows us to get in the required hours for the state, as well as keep those expenditures down for transportation and food service. We may look at that again and may look to run a couple longer days, or excuse me, a few more days and slightly shorter days, but that's going to be dependent upon how our snow goes this year. So we most likely will stick with something very similar to this program. Also want to show our financial results. This year we brought in around $142,000 in net revenues. We're very excited about that. That's up significantly from last year. And you can see where we were back in 2014 running the deficit program. So you can tell we've turned the summer school program around, and just want to say thank you to, again, Mr. Coron, our office staff, our principals and teachers for the great job that they're doing with summer school. A couple of things along with the net revenues. Our summer milk program was highly successful. That netted us about, grossed us about $50,000 in revenues, which was a lifesaver. Student participation numbers were up from last year, so we're excited about that. And then the other function of summer school is, when you don't do it, the kids don't have the opportunity for the extended learning, but the teachers also don't have the opportunity for that extended summer school stipend. So that allows for a little additional income opportunities for our teachers, and I see no point in the future where we won't continue this program.
Still need a motion?
So that's an action item on the subject.
Yes. Motion to approve the annual Summer School Report. All in favor? Aye. Next up is Transportation Historical Overview and Annual Report.
Okay. Again, this is an action item to approve the report. The major points that I'll mention here, revenues were up and expenditures were down as compared to 2017 for our transportation program. That being said, the district did deficit spend around $625,000 for FY18. This deficit spending is a function of the state simply not providing that funding. Transportation used to be fully funded, and it has trickled down significantly down into the teens. So that is just a cost of doing business. The state would say that funding has been wrapped into the foundation formula. But haven't seen that money yet. It's like Forrest Gump and the Apple fruit company one. Many of the current issues from 2017 have been addressed through the purchase of a new fleet, and consideration should be given to the 20% depreciation funding that's offered through the state facilities. Here is kind of the same overview that you guys have seen in the past with our application. This fleet overview will change significantly as we add in our 10 new buses. This is what I want to take a little bit of time to talk about, which is our facility overview. Right now, we're getting around $2,000 in depreciation on the buildings that we have in place. You can see the value is pretty slim, but we are still getting a little bit of money on that, and it looks like it's depreciated out over the 20 years. So as we look at potential new facility transportation facility options, we can look at that depreciation scale. Also, fuel usage expenditures, I didn't want to mark, but that was up about $10,000. I did put a general reference to the cost of fuel as it has risen over the last year. So we expect to see that cost continue to go up just a little bit in the near future. The other thing that you want to keep in mind, those 7 of 10 of the new buses are gas versus diesel, and we do know that they will expect to use more fuel, more gasoline than they did diesel. So we'll try to get a little more details on this line item.
Need a motion to approve the annual transportation report. What are you done, sir?
I was just going to, not quite done. I did put a 17 to 18 expenditures comparison to kind of see where we spent our money. We do know that will go up significantly this year with the purchase of a new fleet, but we do expect that supplies will drop down as well. Here's our overview of historical expenditures back to 2001. You can see kind of where that went. We're still up from 15, 16, but we're down from last year. So we were pleased to see that. And then here's our revenue history by transportation source. You can see that really for the last 15 years, we've not received a whole lot of funding, but it continues to taper off. Actually, it was up a little bit this year, but it's definitely lower than it was 10 years ago. And then here is our deficit spending comparison, so you guys can kind of keep an eye on that as well. As mentioned earlier, these line items 2, 3, and 5 have been marked off of our major issues. So our primary issue number 1 is our ability to continue to recruit, attract, train, and retain high-quality drivers. That continues to be an issue for us, as well as just about every other school district across the nation. So we are currently talking about ways to try to pull in additional candidates to join our transportation team. And that does conclude my report.
You know, just one comment. When you talk about the difficulty in trying to hire new bus drivers that are qualified, I was over in Warrenford there several weeks ago, and there was a bus park there with 2 ladies sitting out there recruiting possible drivers. So, you know, like Dr. Wheeler said, that all these communities are relatively desperate for bus drivers, not just us.
That fruit company.
Yeah,
Different one.
Need a motion to approve the annual transportation report.
Make a motion that we approve. I say that.
All in favor? Aye. Next up is food service historical overview and annual report. This also will be a motion.
Again, the board has seen this information many times, but it's the first time that you'll see kind of a comparison of what we predicted back in 16 to what our revenues and expenditure program looked like in 18 when we brought it back in-house. So we're going to kind of go through this a little bit differently, but we should be able to move pretty quickly as well. Back in 16, this is the estimated revenues. We kind of kept that constant, if you recall, from the last year where we had our data. We had anticipated around 566,000 in revenues. Our actuals came in at 569. However, because of a new program that we were able to seek out through Mrs. Frieden and Mr. Coron for summer school, we brought in an additional $54,000 for summer school revenues. So when I say that was a lifesaver, I really do mean that. We were glad to get that funding, but it did, our regular program revenues did get very close to that target. Expenditures, the target for in-house was that red line, upper right-hand corner at $767,000. Our total expenditures came in at $780,000. So we were again pretty close to what we guessed on that. So I was pleased to see that. There are a couple of things. This is an in-house to actual projection. I'm broken that down a little bit differently later in this presentation. Our deficit spending that we were anticipating was around $200,000 with those new summer school revenues. We ended up with a deficit spending of around $156,000. So that was good news. That last year in OPA, where OPA was in-house, you hadn't seen that number either. That ended up at a deficit spending of $17,000. So we did go up about $140,000, but again, that's something we anticipated and knew. And remember that the two pieces of that increased expenditure would be in our benefits for our employees, as well as the full-time employment. And then we did see some additional increases in food cost. But it was a little bit better than what we anticipated, and hopefully we'll be able to keep chipping that away. A couple of things that I would point out, participation overview continues to decrease. You can see back 10 years ago, we were at 75% participation. That is a little down to 54%. And remember that Healthy Denver Free Kids Act has significantly changed the way we plate a meal. So we're trying to drive that in, and hopefully we will be able to turn around that trend. Breakfast has dropped off a little bit as well, but not quite as extensively. Again, new regulations. We had done two calculations back in 16. We had calculated food costs as a function of reimbursable meal, and we had calculated human resources cost as a function of the reimbursable meal count. A couple of notable things. We had anticipated for food costs to be around $1.77 in that calculation. It ended up being a little bit higher at $1.88. So we will continue to bid out our food and try to keep that cost in check to the extent that we can. Likewise, when we look at the cost for reimbursable lunch for our human resources, we had estimated that per reimbursable meal we'd be spending $2.01, and that came in at $1.91. So we're spending a little more on food than anticipated, and a little less on staffing than what was anticipated. So that pretty well balanced out. And then last is what you've seen before is the context of the new legislation and its impact. There will be no recommendation from me to make any changes to that program heading into next year in terms of outsourcing. It will be recommended that remain in-house, and we continue to try to pull down that deficit spending to the extent that we can.
They come up with some things to try and boost up the participation for breakfast and lunch.
They do, I know at the high school they do the grab and go breakfasts, and we'll do those on different levels of the building at different times. Lunch is just I think there are some things that we'll be able to sort out. Frankly, Panther Hour being one of those, we've got to really take a hard look at how that may be impacting our participation at the high school. And then, with my wife in the audience, you know, I never know at my dinner what, I mean, it's something new every meal. We never repeat any meals, but there are about, I don't know, 6 or 7 that I've come to life over 18 years of marriage. And I think kids would find that to be true too. I know we want to put new options in front of students, but there are probably 6, 8, 10 meals that they really enjoy, and we probably could get away with repeating those meals more frequently and see a higher participation without burnout. So I think that's the key if we can get that done.
Pretty sure it's pizza, hamburgers, and chicken nuggets, strips,
Chicken
lettuce,
patty.
fingers.
Chicken
whatever.
patty, Crispitos.
Yeah, oh, see, yeah.
So- I'm very happy with my meals at home, by the way.
Stop that. Okay, motion to approve the annual this report.
Make a motion to approve the annual results report.
All in favor? Aye. Great. This is the second reading of the MSBA 2018A policy update, and I'll just complete the.
Sure. A and B can be kind of batched together for the purpose of the comments. We usually do a second reading and approval, but I wanted to add one more month in to allow us to process as an administrative team. So I'm recommending a second reading tonight, and we will do a third reading and approval next month.
That was A and B of old business. CSIP update, this is for information.
Okay. CSIP work has continued. We had a very good discussion with our administrative team over really looking at how we want to put in our academic measures. Not to belabor the annual performance report value, but we really want to, with this CSIP, develop a balanced scorecard that is meaningful for our academic work. And it was interesting, we had a healthy but lengthy discussion over what is the most meaningful measures that we can take in our approach to making sure that students graduate college and career ready. We do think we're making progress on this and leaning more towards a real close look at something that most administrators won't talk about, which is the percent of students that are reading that are on grade level when they promote at grades 3, 6, and 9 in reading and math. As we said, Knob-Noster has led the region on the APR, but when we got down to brass tacks about the number of students that we feel like are truly graduating from those grades on grade level, we very quickly realized that we're not at 100%. And that frankly, while we would like to reach 100%, we're probably closer to 80% or 85%, based on the data that we see. Most districts won't talk about that publicly because it's a two-edged sword. But if we're really going to take a hard look at where we are academically and how we're going to get better, we need to talk about that. We did, as an administrative team, say that we don't want to go through the motions of a CSIP just to go through the motions and produce a product. Same thing on our balanced scorecard, we want it to be meaningful. So that's the approach that we're taking, and again, we're making some pretty good progress. The proposed approach on rolling this out, we did do an administrative cabinet meeting on Tuesday. We're looking at doing a meeting with teachers next week on October 25th. Looking at a community engagement piece on November 5th. Bring it to first read to the board on November 14th, and then a second reading on December 12th. We definitely can slow that process if we see that the proposal that we bring forward for perfection and engagement and critique to the board or to the community or the teachers does not, if we're not in congruence, then we can slow that down and reevaluate. But that's kind of where we are on that process. The balanced scorecard, I did ask on last Friday, we had a Missouri River Valley Conference superintendent's meeting. I asked if any of the other conference schools are using a balanced scorecard, and none of them are. So I think that'll give us an opportunity to lead the way. I did talk a little bit about trying to align a conference-wide balanced scorecard so that we could have some consistent comparisons within the conference, and that idea was not very well received. So we're going to go ahead and do ours, and we're definitely not creating the wheel here, but it is something that, again, every balanced scorecard looks a little bit different by the district.
I thought that when we originally talked about this, there were going to be 2 community engagements at differing stages of the CSIP to allow input earlier than where we're putting them in.
We talked about, to be completely transparent, when I've seen those processes done, where you bring in 50, 100 people from the community, my takeaway, and we talked about this as an administrative team, that that's more of a check the box, we did that, and the processes typically go on with, from what I have seen, with not a lot of regard for that input. Doesn't mean that we have to do that, but I've also seen where we can get into the weeds of setting the overarching goals of the big rocks for the district and get the variety of things. We can definitely do that. What we talked about is trying to lay out a plan and ask the community if this is something that seems acceptable to them in terms of the direction of the school district. And then again, if it's not, we can only improve.
Have you had any type of community, parents, teacher input today?
No, we have not. But again, that was an approach that if we were to, in my experience, something as simple as a mission statement, establishing a mission statement can take multiple meetings and wordsmithing to refine and define and get in place. And at the end of the day, it probably doesn't say anything that's a whole lot different than what every other mission statement says for a school district. And in discussion, I think that's an example of how the entire process can roll out if you take that approach. But we can definitely do that.
I don't disagree with your statements, but a lot of that is how it's coordinated and presented. This is kind of, once brought up a month or two ago, it seems like it's taking a fast track on back roads, not really followed kind of what was discussed a year ago. So it's kind of just shocking to me, or just shocking is not the right word, but still trying to comprehend kind of what we're doing. It seems like we're only getting to see bits and pieces and not involved in any of the process.
It's definitely a product-driven approach.
because honestly, the why means more to me than for the understanding of the CISO. And we have not received any of that, and